In this episode of Halloween Tales, we present The Man Who Killed Halloween, a crime that blurred the lines between parental trust and horror, fueled by financial desperation and deception. Ronald Clark O'Brien lived in Deer Park, Texas, with his wife, Daneen, and their two children, Timothy and Elizabeth. O'Brien was an optician at Texas State Optical in nearby Houston. He was active in his church as a deacon, a member of the choir, and he also helped run a local bus program. But behind the outward veneer of church service and steady work was a man under mounting pressure. In the decade leading up to 1974, O'Brien had held over 20 different jobs and was struggling to keep a grip on his financial stability. By late 1974, he was deeply in debt and threatened with the loss of his car, his home, and the ability to keep his head above water. He took out life insurance policies on both Timothy and Elizabeth. Over time, the policies were worth over $100,000 in combined coverage, a sum that in his mind would solve all his financial problems. On the evening of October 31st, 1974, O'Brien took Timothy, age 8, and Elizabeth, age 5, and a few of their friends out for a night of trick-or-treating in a neighborhood in Pasadena, Texas, near Deer Park. The children were excited and collected candy from numerous houses. O'Brien claimed that during a stop at a spooky house along their trick-or-treating route, he was handed 5 pixie sticks, long powder-filled candy straws. He said he later passed them out to his children, 2 of the neighbor's children, and 1 to a 10-year-old boy from his church. Upon returning home, Timothy asked to eat some of his candy. He selected a pixie stick, but because the powder was clumped, his father had to help him break up the clumps. Timothy consumed part of the pixie stick, but complained that the candy tasted bitter, so his father gave him some Kool-Aid to wash away the taste. Within minutes, Timothy began to have abdominal pains and began vomiting and convulsing. Timothy collapsed, and it was at this point that the family rushed him to the hospital. But it was too late. Less than an hour after consuming the candy, Timothy was dead. When it became clear that Timothy's death was no accident, the community was horrified. His autopsy revealed that the pixie stick he had consumed was laced with potassium cyanide, in a dose so high it would have killed 2 full-grown adults. The other 4 pixie sticks that Ronald had passed out were recovered intact. None of the other children had consumed their candy, but one of them had fallen asleep still holding a pixie stick, apparently unable to open it because the wrappers had been tampered with. They had been opened and resealed with staples. The top portion of each candy-filled straw had been infused with cyanide powder. The authorities initially faced a mystery. Where did the poison candy originate? O'Brien claimed he couldn't remember which house had given him the pixie sticks, but a police investigation soon uncovered compelling evidence. There was no record that any of the homes visited that night had handed out pixie sticks. O'Brien ultimately led police back to the house where he claimed to have received the candy, a house owned by a man named Courtney Melvin. But dozens of witnesses placed Melvin at work that night, so he was soon ruled out as a suspect. Meanwhile, as police delved into O'Brien's financial life, they found a motive. He was deeply in debt. His job was precarious at best. His car was about to be repossessed, and his house was facing foreclosure. Investigators also learned about the life insurance policies that he had taken out, and in the days leading up to Timothy's death, his father had inquired about collecting on them. Even more damning, O'Brien had asked a chemical supply company about purchasing cyanide in the weeks before Halloween. He had also contacted acquaintances inquiring about how much cyanide would be fatal. When confronted by detectives, O'Brien maintained his innocence, but the evidence was overwhelming. Ronald Clark O'Brien was arrested on November 5, 1974, and charged with capital murder in the death of his 8-year-old son, Timothy O'Brien, and 4 counts of attempted murder for each of the other poisoned pixie sticks. His trial began in Houston on May 5, 1975. The prosecution presented a case built on both circumstantial and expert evidence. A chemist testified that O'Brien had inquired about cyanide months before the tragic event. A supplier testified that O'Brien had attempted to purchase cyanide. Witnesses described O'Brien's unusual interest in cyanide and his speculations and inquiries about lethal dose quantities. Close family members testified that at Timothy's funeral, O'Brien spoke casually about the insurance payout, suggesting he viewed the money from the death as a windfall. His wife, Daneen, also disputed his version of events, claiming Timothy had not chosen the pixie sticks himself and testified that Ronald O'Brien had coerced him. O'Brien's defense largely rested on conjuring up a persistent urban legend, the story of poisoned Halloween candy being passed out by strangers, and claiming that perhaps someone unknown had tainted the candy. But despite those defenses, the jury's verdict was swift. On June 3, 1975, after only 46 minutes of deliberation, they found O'Brien guilty of capital murder and the associated attempted murder counts. Less than 30 minutes later, they recommended the death penalty. As with many capital cases, O'Brien's execution date would be delayed multiple times. His first date, set for August 8, 1980, was stayed. A second date, May 25, 1982, was also postponed. A third date was scheduled for October 31, 1982. Which ironically would have been the 8th anniversary of the crime. The judge even offered to personally drive O'Brien to the death chamber, but further appeals delayed that, and finally a fourth date was set, March 31, 1984. In the days leading up to his execution, O'Brien's status on death row was notable. According to Reverend Carol Pickett, the prison's chaplain, O'Brien was despised by his fellow inmates. He had committed the ultimate taboo among criminals, murdering his own child. He was socially isolated, friendless, and reviled. His final appeal, which challenged lethal injection as cruel and unusual punishment, was rejected just days before the final execution date. Shortly after midnight on March 31, 1984, Ronald Clark O'Brien was executed by lethal injection at the prison unit in Huntsville, Texas. His last meal was elaborate: a T-bone steak, French fries with ketchup, sweet corn, sweet peas, a lettuce and tomato salad with egg and French dressing, rolls, saltines, Boston cream pie, and iced tea. His final words were defiant but self-reflective. Quote, "What is about to transpire in a few moments is wrong. However, we as human beings do make mistakes and errors. This execution is one of those wrongs, but it doesn't mean our whole system of justice is wrong. Therefore, I would forgive all who have taken part in any way in my death. And to anyone I have offended, I pray and ask for your forgiveness. To my loved ones, I extend my undying love. God bless you all." As he was executed, witnesses outside the prison reacted with taunts and anger. About 300 demonstrators gathered. Some cheered and others chanted, "Trick or treat," a bitter and tragic echo of that Halloween night a decade earlier. Ronald O'Brien was laid to rest at Forest Park East Cemetery in Webster, Texas, and will always be remembered as the man who killed Halloween.